committee of the whole is called back to order. We'll now continue on with still on part 3 of chapter 2. Madam Speaker, you have 2 amendments, if you please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment on Section 11, Part 3, Chapter 2 of the bill. This is for the Guam Cancer Trust Fund. I'm not changing the amount. This is the same amount as last year, and it's dependent on the Healthy Futures Fund. And according to OFB, this is the formula that should have been used, so I'm going to leave that amount. I'm just adding a sentence to the end of the paragraph that says all unexpended and unallotted funds appropriated to the Guam Cancer Trust Fund in prior fiscal years are available in fiscal year 2024 and shall remain in the Guam Cancer Trust Fund and shall be expended by the end of fiscal year 2024. This is language that was also put into FY2023, so I just wanted to continue that.
Thank you, Speaker. Does anyone would like to comment to that? And if not, are there any objections? There being none, amendment passes. Madam Speaker, you still got one more amendment.
Thanks. I hope this one is as easy as that one. Just joking. This is
it might just happen.
This is to amend Section 3B, Part 3, Chapter 2 of the bill. This is regarding the appropriation that the legislature has made in the bill for scholarships at the University of Guam. So my amendment would restore the language and list the scholarships that are currently required by law, by statute, and thus the legislature funds them every year. And these have really been because the legislature has set forth its priorities and what we need. For example, the Pedro Doc Sanchez Scholarship, which is for the Pedro Doc Sanchez Scholarship, the Dr. Antonio Yamashita Teacher Corps Scholarship, which is for teachers. There's one in here for the nursing training program. So I wanted to restore them. And this is what we did in FY23 as well. So I was surprised that it changed again in FY24 because we had gone all askew, funding all different things, but not necessarily funding the nursing that we are in critical need of, the teachers that we are in critical need of. In fact, this current year's budget proposal doesn't include teacher scholarships. And we just heard from DOE that we are severely lacking teachers, particularly special ed teachers. So this would be my proposal. And all the other scholarships that were previously listed, but not in any code or statute of ours, that the university come up with a program, and they feel that the taxpayers of Guam should pay for those scholarships and just present that to us in a separate bill. Otherwise, this is to restore that the funds are going to be prioritized for these scholarships. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Are there, Senator Teller, would like to speak on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I just have a question to the author of the amendment. Student loans was incorporated into this amendment, which was not placed on it prior. So is there a reason why, or is this something that happened last in the 23rd, and then it was just missed, the student loan?
Madam Speaker, do you yield to the question?
The loans that are underlined now in this amendment are the ones that were in the FY23. And these are the ones that we confirmed through going through the code that these exist in statute as our obligation. Some of them, according to UOG, are not active, but we continue to list them until we repeal those and switch them out.
And what exactly, if I may, Mr. Chair, to the author, if she should yield, what exactly are these student loans?
Madam Speaker, do you yield to that question?
Yes.
You're referring to the one that she listed based on statute?
Yes.
Yeah, it's underlined. After merit awards, then student loans.
Yes.
Right.
I have the code section. I just need 1 second to find it in here.
So basically, you're asking for a definition what the student loans are,
Yeah,
right?
student loans, or is
Okay.
this student loans given at the University of Guam? You know, is that,
I believe this is one of the inactive ones, and it was based on
Inactive.
merit and grades, and it's just become inactive, but it's still listed in the code, so I listed it. It seemed to have been repealed.
okay, thank you,
All right,
Mr. Chair.
thank you. Does anyone like to speak to this amendment? If not, are there any objection? There being none, amendment passes.
Thank you,
Madam
colleagues.
Speaker.
In fact, before I close on the UOG section, Mr. Chair, if I could just ask OFB one more time. We've got a lot of phone calls from students claiming that us not funding UOG, they're claiming that we haven't funded UOG enough. At least one text I got says we should fund them up to 30. This is from a student. We also got another one from another student saying that we need to give these faculty raises. And as I said earlier, I believe it's totally within the prerogative of the Board of Regents to fund raises as they see fit. They completely control the pay scales at UOG, compensation packages, and every other benefit at the University of Guam. But as to the overall level of funding, if OFB could just tell us again how they feel about this funding for UOG, this funding level. Because I know you said you raised it $3 million. Is that enough?
Steve?
Yes, Senator. The appropriation made in the FY24 budget for UOG, which is the $3 million, also included money for all those positions that were part of the GPP. So we funded those. That's 22%. All those other positions that were not part of the GPP, of course, we could not fund because there's no authority to pay for that. You are correct in terms of if there's any adjustments in salary for the faculty of UOG. Again, I don't know where the authority actually rests with the Board of Regents, and it really is up to them to decide whether or not this is something that is warranted and merited. And as far as the funding is concerned, again, you can do it two ways. You can have them basically identify funding within their operational budget, or the body can actually go ahead and make an outright appropriation, which again, will result in the Board of Regents deciding where all this money should be or how this money should be spent. But yes, we did adequately fund UOG for the purposes required by law right now, but as far as the faculty, that's something else that we have not addressed at this point.
All right, thank you. That being the last amendment for University of Guam, we'll now move to the next in order. We'll first close part 3 of chapter 2.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we did a bookmark. Are we coming back
No.
to it after the fact at the end and then going back?
After the end of chapter 2, which we still have to go to GCC and the certification, then we'll go back. Before the chapter ends, we go back to the bookmarks such as, I think, DOE and charter school. Then we'll go back to that. But we have to complete all the parts because that's bookmark. Okay? Thank you. Senator Roy?
So is UOG bookmarked still, or?
No, there's no bookmark. There's no request for bookmark.
Okay, side.
Okay? All right? There being none, part 3, UOG is now closed. We will now proceed to Guam Community College, part 4 of chapter 2. Senator Barnett, you have Peace Officer Standard Training Commission. Are you still moving that? The Peace Officers Training Commission? The appropriation of $600,000 from the unappropriate general fund?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is at the request of the Chief of Police, who's now, I believe, the Executive Director of the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission. They actually didn't see an appropriation in the budget bill.
Are you referring if there's an appropriation with the post in the budget bill in FY23
Yes.
or in 24?
Yes, sir.
In 24?
Yeah.
Yes, there is an appropriation. Oh, for 23, there is an appropriation of $72,121. In 24, there's none.
Yeah. So in conversation with Chief Ignacio, he had said that the appropriation for 23 was 72,000 because they still had the availability of ARP funds. And he asked that I fund post-commission, again, restore their funding back to $600,000.
Does anyone like to speak to that? Senator Tello?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, is there an amendment?
Oh, stand by.
Okay.
Can you read your amendment so that?
I can, yes.
Yes, please.
To add a new section to Chapter 2, Part 4, GCC of the bill to read the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission. The sum of up to $600,000 is appropriated to the Guam Community College from unappropriated actual general fund revenues of fiscal year 23 for the purpose of funding the post-commission operations for FY24.
Thank you. Does anyone like to speak? Senator Tello?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, in past, we have funded the post-commission at $72,000. And I just noticed in the ARP funding, the report, I'm sorry, not ARP funding, but the report that comes to us monthly for ARP, we noticed that the governor had placed $600,000+ for the post-commission already. I mean, that's how many times? 6 times the amount that we've been giving to the post for the last years. So I know, I understand, you know, costs have gone up, but 600,000, now you're adding another 600,000 when they already have 600+ thousand. And Mr. Chair, I could probably pull it up and get the exact amount that was appropriated from the ARP funding to the post. So I have to object to this.
Okay, Senator Tello, do you have a copy of that, just so that everybody will be able to see? If we can have the Sergeant Arm make a copy of your mention of the 600,000 that were given by ARP?
Yes, yes, sir.
And then everybody will know, and then I really
Sure.
understand where you come from. 6 and 6 makes 12. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah.
And we'll take a short recess while the Sergeant Arms gets your copy and make a copy, and then we'll all be able to understand. Thank you. We're on recess at this time. Committee hall is called back to order. And Senator Barnett
Thank you,
would like to
Mr. Chair.
address that.
I'm going to respectfully withdraw my amendment to confer further with the chief, because although he did communicate to me that they don't have the ARP funding and that the post commission is actually being moved up to the governor's office, I know that according to the ARP reports, they are listed as it being in possession of some $600,000. So I want to clarify that with the post commission and the chief. Thank you.
You're right, thank you. Is there any objection to the withdrawal of the amendment? There being none, amendments withdrawn. We are now on the second amendment, Senator Barnett. Oh, no, that's part one. Are we done? My colleagues, there are no other amendments for GCC. There being none, we will now close Part 4 of Chapter 2. Part 4 is now closed. We will now move to the next section, which is, I think we're done. The next section is Part 5, Guam Commission for Education Certification. Let me check for an amendment. My colleagues, there are no amendments. There are no amendments for Part 5 of Chapter 2. So at this point, Part 5 is closed. Colleagues, let's take a 2 or 3 minute recess, regroup. We are going back to the bookmark so that everybody's ready so we can hit that off and close Chapter 2. Okay, so a 3 minute, ma'am? A 3 minute only 3 minutes. And I'm watching the clock. All right, thank you. Recess 3 minutes. committee of the whole is called back to order. We are now, my colleagues, we are now in the bookmark. We bookmark Part 1, Chapter 2, which is DOE, and then we'll proceed to the next bookmark, was the charter school. Okay? Once we start, when we get to that part, I'm hoping really that the amendment's already in. All right, and we will now begin with Senator Tello. You have at the time when we bookmarked, there was an amendment that I think you need to recognize first, and then it was replaced, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to withdraw my original amendment that was on line 13, page 19 of DOE Chapter 2. I'd like to withdraw that and replace it for a different one.
Senator Tello, I think it's the line 12 to 19, page 19. You want
Oh,
to
I'm
withdraw?
sorry, sir.
And then you inserted the other one, line 13.
Yes.
Okay? So are there any objections on the withdrawal? There being none, that amendment is gone, is withdrawn. We are now on your amendment of line 13, page 19. Ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My colleagues, I've sent to you on the WhatsApp group chat for the senators a letter from Juliet Kaneni, so I hope that you have a chance to read that letter. And Juliet Kaneni is the head nurse over at DOE. She's a DMP and nationally certified school nurse. She oversees all the nurses' rooms at the schools. It was so disappointing when I called her the other day just to find out about the menstrual hygiene products. And listening to Cooper Nurse saying that he's only spent, the most they've ever spent was $24,000, for these products. And that it was funded through grants. So just to clarify, I asked to speak to the one in charge, the one who procures these products. And Juliet Kaneni was kind enough to actually put it in writing so that all my colleagues can see this. Now, when a bill was introduced, 36-66, it had to do with providing these feminine hygiene products in the schools. But what happened was, and if you look on number 3, these were all funded by federal grants. So we were told, this body was told, that these products would be through federal grants. That's why there is no amount on that bill, Public Law 36-66. There's no amount, no funding, because we all assumed it was going to be federal grants. But come to find out, this body just shot themselves in the foot, because when we passed Public Law 36-66, the Period Poverty Act, which was signed into law in December 2021, it required that DOE have to provide feminine hygiene projects to all female students free of charge. Because it was mandated by law, the CG cannot include it in their grant. We had an opportunity, colleagues, to maintain these products through federal funds. But because we mandated it, it doesn't qualify for grants. So I do plan on introducing legislation after the budget bill is through to repeal 36-66 so that we can avail ourselves of federal funds. Now, in section 1, how much funding do we spend on feminine hygiene products per year was one of the questions, and she responded, about $25,000. Now, knowingly that we cannot get federal funds now because of the mandate in Public Law 36-66, this is the opportunity to provide some funding for them so that they can get their feminine hygiene products in the schools. But as Nurse Kaneni mentioned, they've never gone above $25,000. in the bill, the budget bill, there was an appropriation of $100,000. Do you know what $100,000 can do? It can hire a sped teacher. It could build a ramp for a child with disabilities and awnings at the schools. It could hire maintenance workers. So don't think that $100,000 is just small chump change. Because it's not. It actually can put people in jobs to take care of our students. $75,000, we can use that money to hire more maintenance individuals. We can use that money for the improvements needed to the schools. Why are we going to take $100,000 and just let it sit there for a year when it's already been proven that $25,000 is all that's been used? So I hope everybody has had a chance to read the letter from Nurse Kaneni.
Do you have a copy, Senator Tello?
I sent it on the WhatsApp.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I sent it on the WhatsApp.
Okay.
Just saving some paper, sir.
All right, no problem then. I'm no
Okay.
problem. Thank you.
But the letter is there. And I think, Mr. Chair, it would not do us any good if we were to hold up that $75,000, which we know we need funding for the schools for other areas, and put it in a lockbox and not be able to use it. So, I mean, if anyone, the good chair of oversight of education, there's $75,000. That can hire a maintenance worker. That can hire a sped teacher. But we need to remind ourselves here, these laws that are introduced will have an effect. We lost grant opportunities because of this law, 36-66. So I ask my colleagues to support the amendment. Instead of crossing out the whole entire amendment, I've crossed out $100,000 and made it $25,000. At least this year, we can actually fund the products, the feminine hygiene products this year. Give us enough time to repeal the law so we can avail ourselves of federal grants. So I ask my colleagues to please support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tello. As I'm speaking with the OFB director, before anyone speaks, I'd like him to speak about that account you're talking about, because that concerns me. Steve, if you can speak to that, and then so my colleagues will understand where OFB is coming from when you identify the money that was put in there. Steve?
Yes, Senator, just to note your concern regarding this particular appropriation. It was made known to the body by GOD the other day that they have secured actually federal dollars for this particular program, I believe in the amount of $400,000, which they have spent, I believe, roughly $25,000, $30,000 thus far out of that grant. I just find it very interesting how this particular appropriation started out with $100,000, now it's being amended down to $25,000. Why even appropriate any general fund monies to this program when there's $350,000 still available? And that money actually is available for the agency to utilize. And should they exhaust the funds, I'm sure they can also reapply for it again. So I just don't see the rationale of reducing the $100,000 appropriation to $25,000 when we still have a lot of federal dollars still waiting in the wings to be expended for the same particular purpose.
That's just food for thought. Just want everybody to hear that. Madam Vice, and then you're followed by Senator Barnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, let me share my thoughts on this bill, since I was very familiar when Youth Congress, then Speaker Stephanie Lorenzo, literally fought hard working closely with the Bureau of Women's Affairs to introduce this legislation and why it was introduced. I did receive a note saying that most states that require the public schools supply menstrual products use public funding to buy them. They're not familiar why I don't know what grant funding Miss Juliet or Nurse Juliet is talking about, but having worked closely with the Oversight Chair on Youth, Senator Amanda Shelton, for the past 2 fiscal years, we funded the distribution of menstrual hygiene products for young women in our public schools. Products are necessary and essential for anyone who menstruates, and access to these items is a health care and human right. Colleagues, Mr. Chair, unfortunately, many of our island live with limited means, and faced with this reality, families often prioritize other needs over hygiene products for their children. These children are not in control of their financial situations or what their families can and cannot afford, so these young women should not suffer for an essential function of their physiology. Mr. Chair, Public Law 36-66, the Period Poverty Act of 2021, recognizes a very simple fact of biology and removes the barriers to education that many of our young women and girls face today. The legislation requires that the school nursing of counseling office stock the menstrual products and make them available to the students free of charge. As noted earlier, Mr. Chair, the Period Poverty Act was written by the Guam Youth Congress, and Senator Amanda Shelton, chair of the Legislative Committee on the Advancement of Youth and Women, was honored to introduce it on Youth Congress's behalf to address the issue of period poverty in the schools. By reducing the funding for menstrual hygiene, not only are we effectively compromising the legislation made by youth for the youth, but we are also adding more barriers to education that young women and girls face today. Mr. Chair, I know I only have 2 minutes left, but I want to say that giving that little history and what the stories and the testimonies that came in from girls themselves who don't even want to talk about it, it was the Bureau of Women's Affairs and the Youth Congress that unanimously wrote this bill, asked Senator Amanda to introduce it on their behalf, and worked because they wanted to make sure that all females in all the schools, the public schools, had the opportunity to have that without having them be ashamed. And I know that if this is a money issue and a tracking issue and what was provided or not provided, maybe we really need to check what's going on, because there may be differences of communication on what's actually being done, what was done, and what needs to be done today. So I do have reservations for cutting the 100,000, and if there's money in there, then let's ask for a breakdown on why this funding is being touched. I know if we're going to nickel and dime everything down, then let's make sure that we don't take on things that are literally vital for our women or our female students that go to public school and don't even have the courage enough to talk about this issue. And that's why the Youth Congress and the Bureau for Women's Affairs championed this legislation. So I have my reservations. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice. Senator Barnett, you wanted to comment?
Oh,
You have
yeah,
5
yeah.
minutes on this amendment?
So I just had well, I also have an amendment.
To the amendment?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's ready yet, but I just wanted to.
But you might want to speak on it. If you want, you can speak on it and then speak on the amendment in total.
I just want to
Okay.
be clear and ask if the author of the amendment would yield.
Senator Tello? Yes. State the question, please.
Oh, I just want to ask, because it was, the previous speaker had painted kind of this scenario where this amendment is going to jeopardize the availability of female hygiene products at the school level. So I want to clarify with the author of the amendment if that's actually the case. Thank you.
Senator Tello?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that question. Like I said, I spent some time last night calling up Nurse Kaneni to ask them, has there ever been an issue with women not being able to get feminine hygiene products? And she says no. They've always had that ability to do so. And then just listening to what Steve said, you know, from OFB, that they have, what, close to $300,000 in this account to cover feminine hygiene products, when they only use $25,000 a year for this is going to support them for the next, you know, umpteen years. So, you know, I'm hoping his amendment either takes that $100,000 and gives it to DOE for something else that's important, because they do have the funding for feminine hygiene products. So, no, it will not jeopardize in whatsoever. And this is coming from Kaneni, Nurse Kaneni.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steve, can you expand?
Yes, Senator, just give you an update on the current year appropriation in FY23. There is right now $100,000 appropriated. What's this one? And of that 100,000, they have actually spent $92,000 of that money. So again, let me just reiterate, I have nothing against the program. I think the program is a well-founded, needed program. I'm just saying in terms of how we finance the programs, if there's already a funding source to fund these programs, and that funding source is adequate enough to meet the requirements of the program, then I'm just questioning why is there additional monies being plugged into the program when there's still a lot of money available. That's all I'm saying. I'm not questioning the need of the program. I'm just talking about the funding source, that's all.
But I think you need
On a point of
clarification.
information,
Okay.
sir, on inquiry
Yes.
to that, because earlier that was talked in reference to the education, there was a problem with procurement and not being able to get things facilitated through the process. So if we have to take a moment's recess to literally call in based on the letter that was written to the senator from Agaña, and what is literally happening, because I have information coming in right now saying that if there really is grant funding there, why haven't they gotten it? And if there is a procurement issue, and if there is a problem with facilitating funding now, based on what OFB is saying, that there's still money in the account, then let's see where the bottleneck is. So my question to you, sir, is maybe ask just to make sure that we're not taking away from a program that these kids from the last Youth Congress worked hard to get in, because they did this for 2 Youth Congress terms.
All right.
If not for Bureau of Women's Affairs,
Well,
too.
Understood, Madam Vice. But I think my colleagues need to be, I hope you listen to what Steve mentioned. Out of the 100,000, 92,000 was spent. So it's not like what the letter says, 24. And at the same token, Steve addressed that there is federal money, approximately 300,000. So I think if we can just take a quick pause, and I'll ask the Oversight Chair of Education to contact DOE and validate the 92,000 and the 300,000 in federal money before we move forward, because both issues are good. And I just don't want us to move forward. Senator Barnett, if you can get a hold of DOE and verify, because OFB can see 92,000 was spent of the 100,000.
Can I just ask if
Yes.
OFB was aware of the existence of this federal funding or funding that was otherwise available? Then why did they include it in the bill?
Yes, Senator, we already communicated them through text, both for Frank and I guess that budget analyst, the other one, about the federal grants that they have for this hygiene program. We're just waiting for a response.
Okay. Can we take a short recess?
Yes, we'll take a recess until they get a response, so that we all know exactly what are we dealing with, or how much money we're dealing with, or where the money needs to go. Thank you. We're on recess at this point. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. At this point, I'd like Mr. Guerrero from OFB, the director, to explain whatever information he received so that our colleagues all understand what we're faced with. Thank you. Steve?
Okay, Senator, yeah, the information we got thus far is that the $100,000 that's appropriated in FY23, they have in the AS400 expended $93,000. However, again, the way it works is that DOA remits the money to GDOE. GDOE puts it in their own account. Now, once DOA remits the money to GDOE, it doesn't necessarily mean it's spent. But in the eyes of DOA in the AS400, it's recorded as expended. Now, if you ask GOE side, of the 93,000 or the 100,000 that was, the 93,000 that was allotted to them, how much of that 93,000 have been spent? I believe this is where that $25,000 figure is coming from. I just got off the phone with Frank Cooper-Nurse, and he said he's trying to get the information as to exactly how much money has been spent of that 93,000. Plus, in the past, the last several years, they have been using their consolidated grants to actually fund this program also. But with the recent law that was passed, I believe last year, that indicated that you cannot supplant the program anymore, they stopped using the federal grant because that was kind of like beyond, I mean, that was against the provision of the grant. You cannot supplant the grant with local funds. So what they're doing now is, Frank is telling me that they do need the 100,000 that was appropriated last year, and the amount that we're actually trying to appropriate this year to keep the program going. So that's the explanation as to why we have different figures in terms of expenditures.
Steve, the 100,000 that he was talking about, that came from ARP funding, correct?
No, Senator, that is local funds.
Local funds. It did not come from the ARP funding from the Women's Bureau, because when the bill was passed for this, there was no funding appropriated to them. They were able to get the money from ARP funding, from Women's Bureau, because, like you said, you can't supplant, you can't go to the, the bill already passed, the law already passed. They can't use grant funding. So, and then I was told by, point of information was that the money, the 92,000 was actually up front because former Superintendent Judy Wampat wanted to utilize the money now in the event they may lose it. So they basically ordered more than what they needed in a year just so that they won't lose that money, and that money came from ARP.
The only thing, Senator, I'll reference to is in the FY23 budget, there is a provision under Section 22 GDOE's budget that actually states the sum of $100,000 shall be allocated from the general fund appropriation in Section 1 of this part of Chapter to GOE for the purchase of ministerial hygiene products for the Guam Public Schools. So it is my understanding that GDOE did allocate out of their operational funds $100,000 for this particular program. And
so it came out of their appropriations and not a grant?
Yes, because the account number that we're referencing in AS400 is an annual FY23 account number.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Steve. And this too as well is just another reason why we need to repeal that law, because now we can't even avail ourselves of federal funding because of the law. So thank you so much,
thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Just another point, Senator. In FY22, when we appropriate they appropriate 100,000, they actually expended the whole amount in FY22.
But when you say expended, just like you mentioned earlier, they purchased all of it, but did they use the full amount that year, or did they just put it in a warehouse and use $25,000 worth of products for 1 year and then had it again for the next year? That's what's not, that doesn't, it's contradictive of what she was saying, and she's the one that orders these. So I'm just.
Okay. At least we had a good conversation about it. Now, anyone else would like to speak to the amendment? Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's interesting that this is the topic, but I like the exercise. I like the fact the legislature should prepare, because this is going to be the future budget next year, where we're going to be scrambling to look for funds, since we, are not going to be swimming in all these additional revenues that we have been receiving. And I understand. I can understand the initiative of the Guam Youth Congress, and I certainly appreciate the Vice Speaker acknowledging the work and effort that they put forth. I myself am a two-term youth speaker of the Guam Youth Congress. I used to be in these halls 40-plus years ago with my fellow youth colleagues debating issues of importance. But the interesting thing in the research that I appreciate Senator Tello did was to find out how exactly are these funds being used, and are these students able to get these products. And I don't know if it's because students might not be aware that these resources are available in the school, or maybe the school is not doing a good enough job getting the message out to the students that these products are available should they need them. What is concerning is if they were previously funded with federal funds, and we were able to do that versus using our local funds, and by all means, I'm like, sure, if Uncle Sam can pay for it, and it allows us a little more liberty to use our local funds for other critical things we need, then I'm all for it. I'm a little concerned that as a result of this, we have removed ourselves from the ability to take advantage of local funds that were used to fund this program. And that is concerning, because by all means, maybe $100,000 in this major budget sounds like nothing, but it's a big chunk of change for most people. And if we can still deliver and get the needs that our students have out there, and use federal resources to pay for it, why not? I think we should be working towards that, give them the time to adjust. And I don't think it takes away from the importance of what the intent of the original law was. But if it's taking another $100,000, and Senator Tello elaborated all the other things in this budget we could use $100,000 for, including Department of Education. Their needs are endless. Endless, we know that, no matter how much we pour in. It's going to, the demands are going to be greater than the resources that can be provided. So I'm supportive of the amendment, and hopefully this allows the opportunity for DOE to convert back and get back on federal funds to address this program, so the program's still out there for the students that need it. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Looking across my colleagues, I think we're back with Senator Barnett. You were...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, I spoke already, yeah.
But we were waiting for information.
I had a point of information, yes.
Yes,
So
and
I
that's
think
why I
the
wanted-
issue is not necessarily whether or not the Guam Department of Education has the products, right? I think we've concluded that they are in possession of the products, right? I think the issue for me that I'm committing to follow up on is getting the products out to the schools, because I'm getting blown up by... It's a lot of caps lock here from Jane Flores, the Bureau of Women's Affairs, and she's saying that the GDOE was caps not supplying menstrual products in the schools, and that she helped deliver donations. This is out of the Project Sotera, and the nurses were so grateful they almost cried. So I know that just based on the discussion here that the former acting superintendent Wampat had purchased some $92,000 worth of these feminine hygiene products. So again, I don't think it's necessarily that we don't have them or that we need money to get them. It's just, and God forbid it's another situation with these laptops, GDOE sitting in a warehouse somewhere. But I promise that I'm going to get to the bottom of where these $92,000 worth of feminine hygiene products are, and make sure we get them out to the schools before next Wednesday, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And is anyone else needed to speak on this amendment? Senator Nicholas.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. I sat a great deal over there and talking to my good colleague over there, and she mentioned that we shot ourselves in the foot the last legislation that was passed that prevented us from using federal grants. Is that true? Are you asking that? I'm addressing that to Mr. Mr. Guerrero, please, could you answer?
Yes, Senator. There are some grants that when the government applies for, there's a lot of provisions on how on the utilization of these funds and what you can and cannot do, and there are provisions that some grants will note that when you apply for money from the federal government, you're applying money assuming that these monies are the only monies available for this particular program, project, whatever you want to have, and they're more than willing to provide funds to these programs. But they also can say that it's because of the nature of the program or the difficulty in securing funding, they're always saying that, okay, we'll give you this provided that you abide by all these conditions of the grant. And for a reason, even up to now, I don't understand why the feds would have a problem if the local government, for instance, in applying for a grant, would want to supplement the funding of a program, therefore expanding the needs, you know, the reason that's why the program exists. But sometimes the feds will turn around and says, well, you know, you can't supplant federal dollars. And what that means is that, you know, you can't give more than what the federal dollars is giving you, because then they're going to question the true needs when you applied for those funds in the first place. I don't know why they're so restrictive in that sense. With me, I think, you know, if we can add 100,000, they're going to give us 100,000. We see that the program needs to be expanded to involve more participants, whatever the case be, and we can't get more than 100,000 from the feds. So why can't the local government put in another 10, 20, 30,000, something like that? But they have these restrictions, and once you kind of like go against these restrictions or do something that's not within the confines of the grant conditions, we end up having to return the money back. And that's the challenge that we have, and I guess the restrictions, we need to make sure that we don't go over them, or therefore there's a penalty to be paid.
Thank you, sir. You know, I'm just a layman, so a regular guy over here, and just want to make sure that, you know, I see firsthand, you know, the constraints that our nurses have gone through, you know, being a school counselor. And matter of fact, this was one of the stuff that I actually saw when I was there, and it's provided to our lady students, and I think it's a good thing. Now, I don't want to be the one to, you know, deny this benefit to them, but I do understand my colleagues' concern, and you know, how we can best use general fund money for the good of the whole. So if there are funds that can be won by through federal grants, that would mean they would have to go to work, right? They'd have to go to work to get these grants and possibly delay these products to our female students. Is that correct? Anybody?
Your question, what was your question? I just want to make sure, you're saying that in the event that there is federal money?
Right. Well, denying or with this amendment, that would require the DOE to apply for the grants. Right?
No, they already got the grant.
Oh, they got the grants already.
The issue here is to reduce from 100,000 to 25,000. That's the amendment.
Oh,
Point
okay.
of information, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
if I may.
Madam Senator.
So basically what it is that they utilize about $25,000 a year, and it's not that they don't have the products, they have the products. The problem is that when we passed a bill that mandated, you know, that it goes into the schools, then we were hindered by other grant opportunities to pay for that. And that's the situation that we're in. But what my amendment does is, because I'm worried that now we can't avail ourselves of federal grants, that we give them the $25,000 at least, so that they have it for this year. And then that'll give enough time to repeal the law so that we can then avail ourselves of federal funds.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I think we'd be very careful in what we're going to do, because when you talk about a grant, I won't be talking to a nurse about a grant. I talk to a grant writer. I talk to the court consolidated grant administrators, find out exactly what's going on. Just want to make that very clear.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, based on prior behaviors, what's the worst thing that can come out? What's the worst thing that can come from this amendment?
You want to give a point of information? You have a,
Well, I have a point of information if you're,
Right.
if they don't get the products, the question was?
What's the worst thing that can happen from
That they don't get the
this
products. Mr. Chair, on that point of information and based on what
Point
has
of
been coming in
information,
by-
Mr. Chair, that's not true. They have ordered $92,000
Oh.
worth of feminine products already. So this would not do anything.
I think I don't think she's contradicting anything you're saying. Just making a statement, a point of information. The products won't be available.
that products won't be available, and
Okay.
based on other schools like Okadu and Beneventie Middle, who have been calling Youth Congress and Bureau of Women's Affairs, asking that these kind of products be disseminated because they're not getting it, then my question to this body is, then where is the bottleneck? So you are right, Mr. Chair, when you point out the fact that if you're going to look at grant funding, because it's not specific to that, they didn't lose the grant because they can't. Each grant has a specific mission mandate to be utilized. And if it can coexist with other grants, then it should be noted. And that's where we need to look at, and not take it away from what we've already approved on based on the public laws that have been provided. So that is my take, because we have received from Jane Flores and other nurses from 2 different schools, middle school and high school, saying, we need help. The oversight chair just shared a message with me and saying, if that is so true, then why am I still sending products to the different schools and the different nurses? So there is a problem somewhere, and I wouldn't want to be responsible for taking something away when this program is very important and vital to women who can't speak for themselves, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Point of information, Mr. Chair.
back
Point
to
of
you, Senator
information. The products they say that Jane Flores is, sending out that they're not getting to the schools. That doesn't mean they don't have the products. They
Understood.
have the products. According to her, I have 3 schools call in February. I just sent all senators an email request for BMS. I'm forwarding other requests. It doesn't say they don't have the products. I mean, it's making it sound like this amendment is not going to have products for the schools. That's not true. They just purchased $92,000 worth of feminine hygiene products.
Okay.
So I just don't understand
Point of
why they,
information.
you can twist the words around to make it sound like they're not going to get the products. They already have them. They purchased it.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Senator Duane, so we can move on?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Answer my questions. Thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
Guerrero. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else like to speak? If not, you can close. Senator Guåhan. You got 5 minutes.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to get some clarification. This is actually not my line of business, but I just want to get some clarification on this. And whoever can answer. My understanding, it was noted that $92,000 has been expended because there was a, I guess there was a situation where they may not get the funding, so they expended $92,000 to buy.
They withdrew $92,000 from
Okay.
DOA. That's what they got.
Okay, so, and they already bought these they supposedly bought these feminine products or these?
Okay. Steve?
Senator, I'm going to try to explain it the easiest way I can. When we appropriate money in the Budget Act, any appropriation, that appropriation is normally loaded in Department of Administration's AS400 system, and it's normally set up in an account for the respective departments and agencies and or project we appropriate the money for. In this case with GDOE, in GDOE, we gave them a lump sum budget in FY22 and in FY23. In the same budgets, in the two budgets that we appropriate, we also gave them a provision that allowed them to allocate of that total amount up to $100,000 for this program, this hygiene program. In FY22, they did. They took out $100,000 and they set it up. Based on the AS400, they expend the whole entire $100,000.
Okay.
In FY23, they did the same thing. Of that total lump sum of the FY23 appropriation, they set aside $100,000 for this municipal program for FY23. In the current AS400 account that we have for this particular project, to date, they have spent $92,000 of that $100,000. Now, when we talk about expenditures, this is the DOA AS400 system. In the eyes of DOA, when they remitted the money to GDOE, they consider that as expended.
Expended.
When it gets to GDOE, now that's a different story. It's up to them now to spend that money accordingly.
So we don't, at this point, we don't know whether that money was used to buy these feminine products, right?
If we actually have the hygiene products on hand, yes.
And I'm trying to get around to understand this, because if in fact GDOE actually expended $92,000 for feminine products, as was stated here, and their expenditure is basically $25,000 a year to buy these products, we have a lot of products somewhere if they actually bought those. So it's in storage somewhere. And my question is, if that's if in fact they bought these products because they were scared that maybe they're going to run out or whatever, and they did buy these products. I mean, I know the AS400 could not tell you whether or not the products were bought and they're in a storage somewhere. And so if in fact they were bought and stored somewhere, we have a surplus of products in excess of maybe 3 years, maybe 3 years, based on the expenditure of $25,000 a year on product buying and feminine product buying. And if that's the case, again, my concern is there an expiration date to these things? If in fact they bought them, and there's, because years ago there was tons of Xerox papers in storage, and it's yellow and things like that. I mean, I don't know, and that's why I'm saying, because it could be a waste of, again, like books that we've ordered. I mean, I don't know. I mean, is there an expiration date? Maybe Steve, you know more. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
I won't speak specifically to the hygiene stuff, but in my at least my own personal knowledge, there's an expiration date on most everything. Okay, so but the way I see it, Senator, here, I think DOE is getting the money. We know that because it shows that they were given the money. The DOE may have purchased it, the items. Yeah, and if they did, then it's in DOE. I think the problem is, like Senator Barnes mentioned, is that there's schools that are still asking for the product.
Yes. So do they have it or not? I mean, if the schools are still asking, then someone in the school is not relaying the message that we have a warehouse full of them. Or like you said, expended doesn't mean they used it to buy those products, right?
The way I see it, it could be a lot having to do with distribution within GDOE. If they have the products, it's sitting somewhere within GDOE. It's just not getting out to the schools because it cannot be the funding. We already proved it's not a funding issue. It's more or less getting the product, purchasing the product, and getting it to the ultimate users. That's where the problem is.
Next thing you know, DOE is going to hire somebody to be a feminine hygiene runner to distribute the products.
Could be, Senator. I don't know.
Anyway, again, I'm trying to get over my confusion as to this, and I'm saying if there's, because in years past, I mean, we've heard about books being stored and going to waste, and Xerox papers going to be stored and things of that nature. And if in fact again, GDOE had bought these products. If they bought it, then we bought in excess of 3, maybe even 4 years worth of products. And they might be sitting somewhere, and if the schools are asking, then there's a communication breakdown because it's not being distributed, or in fact, they're using it for some other, expending it on some other situation. And again, I'm just trying to understand this. Yeah, and anyway, Joe, do you understand it?
You know, being on the Board of Education before, that was a big issue in every school.
Okay.
And because I visited, when I was on the board, I visited every school. And I talked to the nurses on where they're at. Mm-hmm. And many issues were concerned. And even when I was elected, mm-hmm. I was donating to some of the schools, and that just bothered me. But Senator Burnett, me and him been talking on the side here.
Okay.
He's got information from DOE.
Okay.
And I'd like him to provide the information so that it's clear to everyone. Could I believe that the reason why it was in the budget is because they still needed it?
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, it is needed. But then, again, I'm trying to understand because it was said earlier that...
But Senator Guåhan, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Like Xerox paper, like computers and books, I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
There's something holding back.
Absolutely.
But I prefer to have Senator Barnett, if you can give us that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a point of information. I just got off with, full disclosure, she's my auntie, the head nurse at GDOE, Julieta Caneni, and so this is the information that I have. So she had said when this law was passed, there was no funding attached to it, but now they have, they had the $92,000 available. They have spent, well, the former acting superintendent Wampad had put a halt on any requisitions that weren't related to addressing compliance with Public Law 37-4 and repairing the schools. However, that was lifted as we got closer to the start of the school year, and Mrs. Caneni has purchased $25,000 worth of feminine hygiene products. She has said that those products will be in the schools, the appropriate schools on Wednesday, and for the remainder of the $92,000, she has an indefinite quantity bid, so they can just replenish the supply as they go, and for the remainder of that money. And that's the information from GDOE, Mr. Chair.
So they're not making any statement about needing the 100,000?
They don't need 100,000. They will have the products. Maybe they might need some of us to drop it off to the schools. I'll let you guys know.
So your information you got is that they don't need the 100,000?
The information I got is that they have spent 25,000 out of the 92,000, and they have an indefinite quantity bid for the remainder, and that they didn't say anything about needing 100,000.
Okay, because the 100,000 is in the budget for 24. It's not for 23. I just want to make sure we get that very clear. What they bought is for something they need to fund today. Okay? Senator Roy, you had your hand up. You're going to make a comment now on the amendment so that we can
Yes.
move along?
Yes, real quick.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to state I'm not a gynecologist. I don't think any of us are here. But I just want, I think this is really a woman's thing, right? And I understand the importance. The Youth Congress representatives definitely wanted to address the situation. Obviously, there was federal funds allotted to fund this service and product for those individuals who definitely need it. And I'm not a female, so I don't know what the cost is breakdown, but I would think that annually, if you have your period every month, right, granted you're regular, then you'd be costing what? I don't know. At the end of the year, you'd be like spending probably $1,200 to $2,000. So I just want to make sure that we have this funding for those individuals who definitely need it. I understand we do have a lot of women in our school system that sometimes don't have the resource at home for whatever reason. The families are facing some kind of difficulty procuring these things. But certainly we have some issues arising with DOE on procuring it. It was very good news that the great senator from DOE found out that there is products procured. We want to make sure that these products are procured for our children, most especially those who really need it and are embarrassed to go out and try to find resources to get them. Obviously, there is a demand for it, so I have my reservations where if we can find money federally, let's get the money and execute it federally. But obviously, it's needed. 24,000 I'm being exhausted, or 25,000 being exhausted, 100,000 adds up. If you have like 100 girls that unfortunately will have it at the same time, then obviously the product will be exhausted, correct? So obviously, I'm not a gynecologist. I just wanted to put that out on the record that it does. I mean, if you have a boy, it's cheaper. If you have a girl, it's more expensive. So, you know, that's a definite huge cost impact. So I just wanted to put that out there. You know, I'm not a gynecologist. I just wanted to put that out. It does add up. Thank you.
Thank you. I think everybody has spoken, other than the two young gentlemen in the front. Madam Speaker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to all my colleagues for the discussion. It's been a good one. But with the latest information, so we've learned that they're ready for school year, FY24. Hopefully, that means that there's enough and we won't continue to get phone calls, because I still get phone calls that some of the middle schools do not have. So I thought maybe they're only distributing it to high schools, not middle. So if DOE is listening, I'm just going to say, we are getting phone calls. Bureau of Women's Affairs is getting letters. They are not getting the products where they are needed. And if anybody had a warehouse full of these during this typhoon or this summer, they should have distributed those out. And if there's an IDIQ for FY24, I think earlier we passed an amendment to this budget that would allow DOE's FY23 budget to continue and not lapse, right? So they will be able to continue with that IDIQ and the 92,000 or whatever remains from the 100,000 from FY23. And hopefully they will just let us know promptly what the real issue is with this. But for all the nurses, yeah, so we've got, you know, the head nurse telling us it's available. We've got other nurses in other schools saying not available. We've got DOE saying we spent the money. So I just think this is another one of those DOE issues that has to be resolved, and hopefully if they can resort to federal funding, that they do that, and that they should have told us that. That should have been, if it's their grant, they should know the rules. They should be able to tell us before we pass any law that would impede on them getting any federal grant money. Otherwise, they are able to use that grant money for something else. Do we know the name of the grant by any chance?
If it's consolidated grants, it's numerous numbers.
So if it's that type of, go ahead.
Steve,
yes.
answer that, ma'am.
Yeah, I don't have the title of the grant, but we just got information from Frank Cooperner's that says the 25,000 requisition is in process. It was slightly higher than 25,000. That means they have to go to the procurement process. It was originally sourced to federal, but they changed it back to local. I guess they went ahead and made an amendment and changed the amount and dropped it down because of the threshold of the requirement of law. So they try to put it under the 25,000 to make it. So he's just asking that the 100,000 is still needed. They still need the 100,000 for FY24.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Speaker, do you have any more? Nothing else? I think everybody has spoken. Are there? I'd ask Senator Teller if you can go ahead and close. Oh, okay. No, once I move to, is there any objection? It's, you can't close no more. It's done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, I think everyone should rest assured that there are products up there. They've bought $92,000 worth of products. As far as the grants that are concerned that I have in the letter that I sent on the WhatsApp chat, I believe the grant source was an HFF grant and a CG. That's the one that said cannot include into the grant now because there's a law mandating it. So those are the grants that are there. Well, my colleagues, like I said, 75, you know, I actually put an amendment that would take out the full 100,000. But because knowing about the grants, I kept 25,000 in there just to cover this year, just in case. But it's obvious we don't need that. I'm sure the DOE would love to have this funding, but do they really need it? You know, there are other areas that we can touch on to actually make a difference. As I mentioned earlier, $100,000 is a lot of money. Like I said, it can hire maintenance workers, it could hire the SPED teacher, it can build a ramp for a child with disabilities and awnings so they don't get wet when they go to school. There are so many ways to utilize this money that'll go a long way. Now, I wouldn't say this if I knew that there were no products being purchased. But there are. 92,000 worth. So I ask my colleagues, please support this amendment. It makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. My colleagues, there is one objection. All in favor of this amendment, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Amendment passes. Now we'll move to the standby. Senator Barnett, you have the AED, the 150,000? No, which one's in order? Order first. Follow the sequence. Let's follow the sequence now. You got the AED first.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. This is on page 19, my colleagues, on part 1 of chapter 2, BOE.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a simple amendment, add a new section in Chapter 2, Part 1, GDOE of the bill to read. AEDs for GDOE, the sum of up to $150,000 is appropriated to the Guam Department of Education from unappropriated actual general fund revenues fiscal year 23 for the purpose of funding and purchasing automated external defibrillators pursuant to Public Law 37-25. Of course, sir, this public law was a measure that we had unanimous support before this August body. I always wanted to say that in August. And I just asked the support of my colleagues for this $150,000 that would go towards purchasing these AEDs for every school across the district. And there's even a little bit extra there for a few duplicates, sir. So again, I just asked for the support of my colleagues for this simple measure that really closes the loop on the law that the bill that we passed here that became a law that mandates the placement of AEDs at all public schools. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. Any colleague would like to speak on this amendment? Senator Blas, and then followed by Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess if the author of the amendment can yield to a question, and that being when this first, under Public Law 3725, what was anticipated to be the funding source for the AEDs when it was first passed?
Yeah. Do you yield to that question, Senator Barnett?
Sure. Sir, I'm not quite sure if we attached an actual funding source. I think that GDOE was supposed to get back to us and let us know the cost and that we had funded in the budget process, which is what we're doing now, sir.
No, we're doing it.
Thank you.
Senator Blas, just to advise you that we did, OEB does conduct meetings with all the agencies, and Steve will comment to that, other than the public hearing that we had on budget.
Okay, so I'll wait for Mr. Guerrero to comment on it.
Yes, Senator, when we met with GDOE at the office preparing their budget, there was no mention about trying to fund this particular requirement of law. In the law, in 37.5, it did indicate that no appropriation was being made, but it did instruct GDOE to inform or request to the legislature funding for this. So they did not do it, at least through the budget process. I'm not too sure whether or not they requested it as a standalone bill with the legislature other than the Budget Act.
Well, I guess it then begs to ask another question, if the author could yield that where then did we come up with the sum of $150,000?
Senator Barnett, do you yield to that question?
Sure, sir. AEDs cost around anywhere from $900 to $1,200. And so, let's do the math on this. 41. Can I ask for a short recess, sir?
What?
Short recess?
Yes, we'll
Thank you, Mr.
call
Chair.
a recess. Thank you. The committee of the whole is called back to order. Senator Barnett, do you have the answers to the question that was posed by Senator Blas?
I have some information, sir. I just got off with Deputy Superintendent Chris Anderson, and so there was some discussion Senator Blas and I had about whether or not this the purchase of these AEDs, which again, going back to my bill and subsequent public law, there was a fiscal note attached that did say $151,000, and so these AEDs that we're looking to purchase are about $3,000 a pop. And so again, I was just on the phone with Deputy Superintendent Anderson, and he told me that there is no consolidated grant availability for the purchase of these AEDs, and that it would have to be tied to a specific project, and they'd have to, you know, do it in advance. So again, I just ask for the support of my colleagues for this amendment that would again just appropriate $150,000 to fund these life-saving devices that would be placed at each of our 40 public schools, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Please call Senator Blas, because he still had the floor. Let's just do I guess a 1-minute recess as soon as Senator Blas walks back in. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Guerrero.
Senator Barnett, your bill, your proposal, does this also include the charter school?
It does not, Mr. Guerrero, but
okay,
that is a good idea.
Senator Barnes, just to let you know,
That's Barnett, sir.
Oh, I'm a Barnett. How can I? My apologies. I'm sorry.
What else today, guys? What else?
Both starts with B. Senator Barnett, just to remind the body that when the bill for this 3725 was introduced, BBMR did a fiscal note, and in that fiscal note, it indicated that a total of $151,000 would be adequate to fund all the 41 schools plus the charter school. So I just thought I'd throw that in.
Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. I'm looking at that right now, and you are absolutely right. I stand totally corrected that the numbers here are for the elementary schools. It would be $85,000, $26,000 for the middle schools, $26,400 for the high schools, and then for the charter schools, and there's 4 charters here listed, $13,200 for a grand total of $151,800. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I think Senator Blas said he's good with the information. Anyone else like to speak to this amendment? No one? Senator Brown? Yes, ma'am?
I want to clarify the funding source. We're talking, which amendment is this? I thought it was the one for half of 500.
That's 150,000 from the unappropriated actual general fund revenues. I'm still trying to understand that definition.
What kind of Finno-English is that? What does that mean?
I don't know, but from unappropriated actual general fund, Senator Brown, I think maybe Senator Steve Guerrero can speak to that, because I was trying to define that.
That's interesting language, but I'm sorry, I need some education here, because I mean, Mr. Chair, I don't have a problem with the intent of the request here, but you know what? I like to deal with real money. I like to deal, we're all bragging we have $100 million in excess this fiscal year from last fiscal year, then can we appropriate it from a tangible source rather than unappropriate, unaudited, unappropriate actual general fund revenues? That's new language now. What does that mean?
Mr. Guerrero, if you can answer that, please, and maybe you can define that statement.
I would like to think, Senator, the meaning of this is actually from the audited actual FY23 revenues.
Okay, and what is that? We don't know yet because we don't have an audited 23 FY revenue report before us, unfortunately.
That's correct, Senator.
So we don't know what's in there or what's left. What's really left after all the review has been done and the obligations have been paid? We don't know that. So I'd like to, I like to work in the real world, and I'm going to be consistent because, even though it's a smaller amount than some of these other requests for appropriation, I have concern about this continued. We're here to deal with real money. At least I'd like to deal with real money and know that these things are being, if we're going to approve it in the budget, that it's going to be funded. It's going to be funded once the budget's approved, not whenever, however, maybe it never gets funded because, the funds are not there from the source identified. I don't know why we're doing this. Otherwise, we might as well throw the whole budget. Why do we even have budget hearings? We shouldn't even bother doing that. We should just, whatever, throw it up in the sky and see what falls down. I just have to object because of the funding source. And, I've objected to others in all fairness, even though I appreciate the intent and supportive of the intent. But you know what? Find money in this budget that's a tangible appropriation source. I'll be happy to support it. But if we're going to continue to use this unappropriated actual general fund revenues or unaudited revenues or whatever we want to use, it means there's not real cash available now to fund this at this time when we approve the budget. I just think we need to get back to reality in terms of how we're spending money. And to be spending money we're not even sure we have, and to continue that practice against another foreign practice to me. We might as well just go back to appropriating whatever and then blame the governor because the governor didn't fund it. That was the old day style. I think we need to be transparent with our people that when we're actually doing a budget, we actually mean what we say and we say what we mean, that it's actually something that has a dollar figure, a tangible dollar figure that we've identified that's attached to it. So that's my only concern with regards to this proposed amendment on the funding source.
Thank you, Senator Brown. I didn't see anybody else's hand. With that, I'd ask Senator Barnett to go ahead and close in this amendment, and then we'll move to the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't even know what to do with these amendments because it sounds like we're hardlining and I'm not trying to give anybody a raise. We're just trying to save some lives here at our public schools. It's very simple. This type of language has been used before. It's been approved before. And again, I would just, with all due respect and humility, ask for the support of my colleagues again so that we can do something good for $150,000 and put these life-saving devices at our public schools. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Burnett. There is an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion fails. Senator Duenas, you had a motion you wanted to pose?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, considering to evaluate sources on additional proposals as well and the lateness of the day, I'd like to come back tomorrow morning at recess and come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
We will recess till 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you, my colleagues.